Hey there, it's Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my horoscopes and my forecast for May 2026. And I know it's already May 2nd, but better late than never. I've had a really busy schedule, and I still want to get this video out because there's plenty of time left in May. And we're really just past the Scorpio full moon, and you might be coming down from that full moon still, you might be feeling it still. But either way, there's a lot of astrology to cover in May, and we'll also review April a little bit before I jump in. If you want a one-on-one reading with me, you can book that through my website. That entails a 2-hour reading comprised of 1 hour covering your birth chart, your essence, basically, another hour covering, the future through the lens of transits, secondary progressions, solar arc directions, the degree theory, and more. And those readings include lifetime access to the recording of the reading, in addition to, of course, you are at the reading, so you get to be at the reading, ask me questions, you get the recording after. And a couple weeks after the reading has concluded, I even send you a personalized PDF that summarizes the insights. So it's very much worth getting a reading from me. And if you are more interested in sort of asking kind of a one-off question, you can have the chance to do that through my weekly Substack show, where I do live readings. I usually cover 3 to 4 people a week. And just by commenting on the show, you are eligible for a reading. So become a paid subscriber to my Substack if you want access to the weekly show, where I also just talk about other aspects of my life that I rarely discuss publicly. So, anyways, let's share the screen, and you know the drill. So we're looking at the astrology of the month. And just again, to give you context, we've completed the Scorpio full moon. We're still at this exact moment facing a Scorpio moon. I say facing because it's not the easiest moon. I can say that with conviction because I have a Scorpio moon in my chart. But anyways, some of you may have had a cathartic moment where deeply buried emotions were released. Maybe, something had reached an extreme and it was untenable at this point, and you had to let it go or just transmute the energy into a higher frequency. Some of you might have realized that you were harboring resentment or bitterness or, extreme emotions, and you had just sort of lodged it into your nervous system. And now, hopefully, you finally have purged it. I know I experienced a lot of emotion. It was 2 degrees off of my natal moon. 9 degrees is the degree of my moon. So I went to on Friday, I got a massage, and a massage is actually a really interesting experience on a full moon because it really actually, it does release toxins and whatever else like in your body and stored memories sometimes. So during the course of that, I had a lot of revelations actually about some things I want to share with everybody in the coming weeks and months. So there's a lot about my personal story that I don't talk about on social media, but I feel like this full moon showed me that it's finally time to share a little bit more about my personal life, which I don't really do because I have 4 planets in Scorpio: Venus, Pluto, Sun, and Moon. Even though they're in the fifth house, still a little bit more. I tend to err on the private side. So, anyways, I also just want to reiterate something about horoscopes in general. Because a lot of you watch these videos and you're like, well, are horoscopes like legit? Are they not? Because I'm sure you hear some astrologers telling you that the only way to get a relevant forecast is to get a birth chart reading. Other astrologers will say, well, no, horoscopes also matter, though. I'm very much in the camp of believing that horoscopes are useful for the public. Obviously, a birth chart reading is also going to be the most precise way to try to forecast something, in your future. But horoscopes are relevant because there is a common denominator at the end of the day. So, for example, Saturn's in Aries for the next 2 years. That will mean that all Cancer risings, but also even I would argue Cancer suns and even Cancer moons, they're all facing some sort of Saturnian pressure, either literally in their 10th house if you're a Cancer rising, or symbolically in the 10th house, because it's in a superior square to your sun or moon. And think about it like a hub and spoke model. So in that example, the hub would be Saturn square, your sun, moon, and rising, and the spokes would include like pressure in your career, feeling stultified in your career, feeling judged by a parent, becoming a parent, all of these things. So I think, even I guess the most powerful example would be like Pluto. Pluto was in Capricorn for 16 years. All Capricorn sun, moon, and risings, they felt the intense transformation potential of Pluto, and they all had to pass through these gateways to transformation by, kind of having some of their deepest, darkest emotions exposed, realizing that those frequencies had to be elevated to something higher, or that they had to again let go of something that was, really hard lodged in their nervous system. Maybe they were having to face their fears in some respect. Anyways, that's all to tell you that horoscopes matter because there's a common denominator. And even in the age of AI, I just don't think that people can always, be tracking their chart. Maybe they just don't you don't have time for it, or maybe you just want an intuitive read on the cosmic weather. I think there's some value in that because when I'm doing a horoscope, I do have a bird's eye view on the energies, and you also benefit from that bird's eye view. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't bring that context into a personal reading for you, but I just think two things can be true at the same time. My Mars Gemini definitely believes that. So, yeah, of course, get a reading from an astrologer, preferably me. But either way, in addition to read like individual readings, the horoscopes will still give you like a lay of the land. And, of course, there's mundane astrology, which, is going to address something that a nation is going through or something like that. So, anyways, with all that said, this is where we are right now at the time of the show. Scorpio moon still hangs in the air. We're feeling the sort of, the depths of it, the intensity, the compulsion, the obsession. And in a lot of ways, Scorpio gives us this ability to kind of like navigate the cycles of life and death, but not necessarily literally. Can be like, the death of one phase of your life, the birth of another. If you think about the most classic example of this, if you have a child, it marks, yes, the birth of your child, but also the death of your old life. So so with Scorpio energy, you have one door closing, another door opening. What else is going on right now, though? We have Mars continuing to just gallop forward in Aries. It's no longer conjunct Saturn. It's been a while since then. No longer conjunct Neptune, of course, either. And April, for context, that's when Mars went into Aries, April 9th. And right off the bat, Mars had to cross past Neptune and Saturn. And that was very depleting for many. I still believe, though, that the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aries was important to capitalize on in the sense that ideally you did plug into something new. You did venture into something else. I saw some videos from other astrologers saying, oh, you're exhausted because Mars is conjunct Saturn. I actually disagree with that. Sometimes that can be true depending on the sign. But in Aries, you shouldn't view it as Saturn is stalling Mars. You should view it the other way around. Saturn in Aries is inhibitive, yes. Because Saturn hits the brakes, Aries wants to go. But Mars comes in and applies the conjunction. It's the faster moving planet. And yes, Saturn is, the greater malefic, but Mars came in and gave Saturn the impetus to actually do something. So I would argue the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has a lot more to do with the sort of low-flying anxiety and depression and exhaustion in the collective, because there's no certainty when Saturn and Neptune are conjunct. The father archetype becomes a little bit weaker. And that could be like our own inner father archetype, or our sense of an authority anchoring us can start to erode. Because when Saturn and Neptune conjoined in 1989, for example, most people who were born in 1989 have fathers who are less reliable. It's pretty much a science. And yes, they have siblings potentially who were born in other years that maybe don't always indicate that. But the people born in 1989, as well as 1953, as well as 1917, these are charts of people who have less steady, stable, or present fathers. And also in the collective, there is a disillusionment or a dissolution of foundations more so, whether it's with the USSR and the, you know, late 80s, early 90s, or now we've talked about this ad nauseum, but like regime change in Iran and um, what I just mentioned of like everyone around you having existential crises because they're desensitized at this point by social media and AI and the internet, and it's like I don't know, I just feel like a lot of people are just feeling detached and alienated from themselves and their original purpose and their sort of raison d'etre or whatever, and they a lot of people are just feeling unmoored. I mean, there's just not a clear anchor right now. And yes, you see that in the dislodging of entire regimes or flimsy regimes, but you also see that with, sort of people's inner scaffolding. The inner scaffolding is a little rusty and it's starting to break down, right? So that I think the Saturn Neptune conjunction, by the way, is going to reverberate throughout the year because Saturn's going to retrograde. Like, yes, Saturn's like a month away from not even being in the orb of influence of a conjunction to Neptune, but just wait till September. It's very much retrograding back far enough to be, co-pre or not even co-present, but conjunct Neptune again. So, anyways, Mars in Aries has given us some kind of galvanizing force here. It has been a galvanizing force, and it's going to be in Aries until May 18th. So, up until May 18th, continue to again take advantage of it because Mars in Taurus is a little bit slower and stodgier, and Mars will conjoin Chiron, which is not so fun. It's a little bit injury prone, especially for the Scorpio risings, actually. I'll talk about that in the horoscopes. But overall, up until May 18th, consider yourself more active, you have more vitality. One, aspect to pay attention to as well is Mars squaring Jupiter. So interestingly, Mars squared Jupiter, I think at the 19th degree as well, back in September, early September when it was in Libra. Mars in Libra, square Jupiter in Cancer, coincided with a lot of violence, acts of aggression. There were many unfortunate incidents in late August, early September, whether you think about it from the lens of the woman who was stabbed to death in Charlotte, or the attack on the church in Minneapolis, or you think about how Charlie Kirk was assassinated in early September last year. There was a lot of violence, and we witnessed a lot of this on film, right? All too vividly. Of course, there were other things going on as well, but I just think as a U.S. astrologer, I guess just thinking about some U.S. examples. I mean, that definitely gripped the nation a lot. And again, it was like we saw footage of all these things and the violence and the aftermath. And I think that's a very Mars square Jupiter example because Mars attacks, Mars is fighting, Mars is aggressive, Jupiter expands, and honestly, regardless of zodiac sign. So don't think about Mars in Libra as toothless. If Mars in Libra squares Jupiter in Cancer, that's an athlete's chart, by the way. If someone was born in early September 2025, they might become an athlete. I believe Travis Kelce has Mars in Libra squaring Jupiter and Cancer. I mean, you know, there's plenty of strength when Mars and Jupiter square off. Sometimes too much. Sometimes it's a little bit boisterous and again aggressive. But this time, Mars is squaring Jupiter from Aries. So the next couple days, I believe the square is exact on May 4th, but the next couple days, you definitely want to avoid inflaming anyone who is inherently aggressive. You also want to, avoid going over the top, you don't want to lose your cool, but at the same time, recognize that there is more energy. It's high charged. Also, Mercury just went into Taurus. It's squaring Pluto for the next few days. Mercury square Pluto, it's a fairly common transit, but it can bring up secrets, or it honestly sometimes brings up financial information. And the Scorpio full moon that we just had may have actually been financial in nature for some of you. Scorpio does rule other people's money, investments, debt. Debt may have been a topic that came up for you. Tax season just finished, so maybe some of you are assessing your finances in the aftermath. Also this month, we continue to have Venus and Gemini. It's not going to be there the entire month. Let me quickly look up. I believe it switches into Cancer around the same time that Mars leaves Aries. So, yeah, because there's going to be a nice sextile between Mars and Venus. Yeah, wow. So Venus enters Cancer May 18th, and Mars enters Taurus on May 18th. So, May 18th is a line of demarcation this month. Up until May 18th, I mean, we've got a lot of fire in air. It's exuberant, it's buoyant, it's outgoing, it's extroverted. Even if you're not extroverted, you're going to be a lot more social up until May 18th, and hopefully after as well. But you can see Venus and Gemini here. It's Venus and Gemini naturally is more plugged in to what's going on with, well, it's more conversational. It's keeping up with the news. Maybe it's debating with others. It's having fun. It's joking. It's just throwing out a lot of different, ideas. And Uranus is in Gemini, of course. So Uranus in Gemini is ushering in a new 7-year era until May 2033, when the Gemini house of your chart is going to get electrified and disrupted. And we're starting to feel the Uranus-Pluto trine. The Uranus-Pluto trine is a chance for those of you from the mid 60s to really kind of lead the way towards new, I don't know, kind of a new era of the world, because you're all born with Pluto conjunct Uranus. Let's go back to, 1966 or something like that. So there you go. I almost got it down to the day. So Uranus and Pluto, I'm sure they conjoined a couple times, but Uranus and Pluto conjunct 16 Virgo in 1966. And this is a generation that I think is more provocative, more irreverent, and less sort of likely to just, follow orders. So there's this sort of, yeah, again, unruliness and disobedience about this sort of mid 60s era generation that I think definitely manifested in their music. You think about the music of the 90s. A lot of people born in the mid 60s really came into prominence in the 90s with their music. A lot of people I've met from the mid 60s also are really interested in technology, like sort of, they were kind of early adopters of the internet. They have sort of some first mover advantages there. But anyways, this subgeneration of the mid 60s now gets to benefit from the trine in this cycle of Uranus and Pluto. And so I'm fully expecting people from the mid 60s to really lead the way in terms of, new ideas, thinking outside the box, being a little bit more avant-garde. And of course, also we have Gen Z really coming to the forefront because Uranus is, I just think with Gen Z, like having Pluto and Sag, Uranus is going to be opposing their Plutos over the next 7 years. The Uranus-Pluto opposition, I think, can really energize a generation. I mean, I just had Uranus opposite my Pluto in 2022. That's when I fully dove into, becoming a full-time astrologer. So for Gen Z, even though they're already on the map, I think they're going to be even more kind of just challenging, right? Challenging the status quo, I should say. So, anyways, Uranus and Gemini, trining Pluto. I would hope that that also stimulates a little bit more collaboration, maybe even in person, because I want to remind people of this great conjunction that we had in 2020. 2020, because, I know a lot of you, report, I get messages all the time from people saying, I really got into astrology in 2020 and 2021, or I had my spiritual awakening in 2021, or, I discovered tarot through TikTok in 2021. Why was early 2021 especially such an inflection point? for the spiritually minded? Well, it's because we had an Aquarius like megastellium in January 2021. I believe February 2021 as well. I mean, you look at this pocket of time, early February 2021, squaring Mars, Uranus squaring Saturn. That was a time of, I think, again, challenging the mainstream view of things, challenging mainstream opinion, educating the self in new ways, re-educating the self, deprogramming. A lot of people went through awakenings in 2021, and they started to wonder, like, maybe the 5D is real, and maybe the Earth split is a real thing. Whatever it is. And a lot of these grand theories have run up against a wall lately, but I think, don't be discouraged, I should say, if you feel like your initial mission that sunk in the early 2020s has faded, or maybe you feel like you've lost touch with why you even got into astrology or why you even care about this stuff. I would not lose hope, but I also like I think it's natural right now to be questioning like why the fuck am I on a spiritual quest? Like it's exhausting, right? Like why can't I just be living in the moment and caring more about who wins the Stanley Cup than caring about my past lives. And the answer is, of course, that these things ebb and flow, but also in terms of the astrology, 2021 just unleashed this Aquarian energy that in some ways might not be matched for a long time, even though Pluto was not in Aquarius at that time. Maybe the next time it really is felt in that same way is, I don't know, maybe the next Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Libra, but that's in Libra. So, I mean, it was an interesting time. Let me go back to it right now to show you. I mean, I opened my first astrology book on the Great Conjunction of December 2020. February 4th, 2021. I was deep in the astrology, I was deep in my educational, journey. I know many of you were as well. And it was in my eighth house. I'm a Cancer rising, so all the Aquarius transits were in my eighth. But I think for a lot of people, 2021 is when you know, they came online. So, anyways, I think there's a fatigue that has set in regarding various esoteric practices. A lot of people saying, oh, this is the date when, I don't know, disclosure happens, or this is the date when the new earth is revealed. And inevitably, life marches on, and we just keep smashing against the rapids and the waters. And like we're kind of all just canoeing down this crazy fucking river. But the thing is that we are kind of wired in our modern world to always want more, right? Like it's almost like we're all shareholders at Apple or something. And it's like, oh, your revenue shot up 40% year over year. I mean, that's not the actual number, but like, let's just say. And then another year, it's like your revenue went up 20%, 10%, 5%. And then you're eventually like, what the fuck? Like, why is my company not rising 40% year over year again? Like, why can't it be like the 90s or whatever the hell? It's because we have trouble, I think, appreciating sort of the gravity of something or the importance of something or the blessing that something really truly is. And even if I show you this exact moment from February 2021, the North Node, South Node were squaring Neptune. I mean, that even heightens, I think, the fatedness, the fatefulness of that spiritual awakening. So a lot of you have maybe had a falling out with some of your spiritual practices, or maybe you feel like the initial buzz of it is just not quite there anymore. But that's not the point, right? We're not supposed to be in this for like a high. We're not supposed to be in this for a dopamine rush, right? We're not supposed to be in this to feed some kind of narcissism either. So for a lot of people, I think there's a come down from the initial wave of exposure to this whole new world. That doesn't mean that you're going to lose touch with it forever. But really, just think about where were you in 2018 versus now? Like it's miraculous, right? How much of a transition you've gone through. So, anyways, the reason I'm bringing this all up is because Uranus in Gemini trining Pluto and Aquarius it's going to show you that there's just always going to be more information like flooding the airwaves, and you're going to be inundated with data, and it might be more just descriptive data. There's not a clear point to it, and it's fed to you by AI. You have to learn to filter that out, and maybe you already have, but like filter out the crap, take stock, and remind yourself of the essence of the insights that you've gained in the past couple of years, especially during the lockdowns and the pandemic. Because I think a lot of us have mountains of wisdom that maybe we take for granted or we overlook it, or it's not the bright shiny thing anymore, so we set it down and we look for the next type of enlightenment that we can experience. But remember that the insights you gained in the early 2020s, they will come in handy throughout your life. And, you know, eh, just really let it marinate. And don't drop it. Don't drop those insights. Don't leave them aside. Don't set them aside because, if it just becomes a matter of, hey, I just want new insights, new information constantly, then the Uranus-Pluto trine, yes, it can be great, but I think it's great for AI. I think it's great for the robots. I don't know if it's great for us. It might just be more AI slop, more AI music, more forecasts played at 5 times playback speed and all the information, all the answers you could ever ask for. But the more we know, the more answers we get. It's like, in a way, the more empty we feel, right? Because, I can Google anything I want, you know. I can ask, AI, like, did the coach of the Carolina Hurricanes used to play for the Hurricanes? Or who is this guy? And I can find out instantly. But, like, why does that matter? Like, do I actually have to know that? It's like we all kind of are feeding on this insatiable desire just to know more stuff. And it's just more stuff. It's like the equivalent of just buying more shit on Amazon. It's like our houses have become distribution centers and our minds have just become dumpsters for useless information. I honestly believe that. Like half of what we search on a daily basis, we don't actually have to know. Half of what we read in the news, we don't actually have to know. Uranus trine Pluto, Jupiter and Leo coming up, just sort of expanding Uranus by sextile, opposing Pluto, in a lot of ways expanding the transformation of Pluto's potential in Aquarius, or the transformative potential of Pluto in Aquarius. Um, Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. It's a whole new era. But really, it's like we're all just kind of drowning, I think, in information and less so genuine insights. And we just have to remember that, hey, we came up with some beautiful ideas in the early 2020s during that Aquarius stellium, during that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It would be a shame if we just kind of forgot about it or forgot why we were doing this. Because I think, of course, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm in this to try to find harmony with the universe out there. I'm maybe initially was intrigued by astrology because it described something about my personality, but that was just a gateway to something more important. Like if somebody was just doing astrology to validate some kind of vanity, like, or to feed some kind of vanity about like, oh yeah, I'm really unique and special, and I just want to keep rehashing that and picking away at that by like understanding my birth chart at even greater level of depth. It's like if someone's in it for that reason, then yeah, of course, they're going to move on. They're not going to give a shit about astrology at this point because they've already sort of excavated everything they needed out of their birth chart. Or maybe they just view astrology as a way to hack into wealth, gaining wealth, or they found astrology as a way to convince someone to like them. A lot of our best insights, I think, are still to come, but a lot of them were generated in the early 2020s. So, anyways, if you had a genuine awakening in the last couple of years or last few years, we'll say the last 5, 6 years, and those awakenings really are helping you like lead with your heart more than your brain in a lot. And I don't mean that in the way of like just being dumb. I mean like if spirituality has helped you become a better person, if it's helped you become more compassionate, if it's helped you even like unleash your creativity in a different way, if it's helped you if it's helped you experience camaraderie with others, then yeah, you're gonna keep pushing and succeeding while Uranus is trining Pluto. But if again you're in it for a vapid reason, then like Uranus trine Pluto, I actually think about it as like a storm cloud of just more ones and zeros that it's just gonna like distract you into some like thinking about something else. Oh, here's a cute video. I don't fucking know why I'm even doing this other shit. Like, why am I on a spiritual quest? So, anyways, maybe just journal about this. Go through your photo albums. Like, I can't stress this enough. Early 2020, or sorry, early 2021, January, February, especially 2021. I guarantee you, if you go back to those times, you will remember, oh, I saw, that YouTube video. I remember that Pam Gregory video, or I remember whatever it was. I remember watching this practitioner and everything just clicked all of a sudden. Like really carry that wisdom with you into this next phase of information overload. Because again, the tragedy of modern life is that we continue to know more and more than we ever have, but we also almost have less and less knowledge, like true knowledge, because a lot of, the deepest knowledge really comes through when we sort of in the stillness of our minds, when we aren't thinking at all about something. We're just experiencing something in our environment and observe. Let's say you're sitting in front of a tree for 2 hours. You might not have a single conscious thought during that stretch. But as you commune with the tree, there is like a deeper intelligence that suddenly kind of, seeps in. So, anyways, I just think there's a desensitization risk in our society. I think we are becoming more and more desensitized to like pretty much anything because we've viewed the most horrendous videos of like death and destruction. We've also viewed the most like um I don't know, crude or I don't know. I don't know what the word is. Like I don't want to say like promiscuous, but like, we've just seen the extremes of every archetype on film and we've like seen so much of what's happening in the world and we've opened this box of like infinite access to everyone's life and everyone's mind and knowing everyone's thoughts and it's obscured, I think, again for a lot of people like the original intent of like what they're trying to do what they're trying to do in life. Maybe it's unfortunately drowned out some of the richer insights that they've gleaned. And I don't know. Yeah, I just again worry that we continue to also overemphasize the sort of left brain thinking, the more analytical thinking, which I know for some people watching this, they're like, that's not true. We live in a society of tyrants and they're belligerently going after each other. Yeah, I mean, okay, sure, there's a projection of the sort of unhealed masculine at the upper crust, but at the same time, you also have this this overthinking of everything, which also causes, again, sadness. When we like are always analyzing, everything in a logical way and shutting down our creative minds, maybe because we can't make money doing that in our society, then that also makes us really sad, right? Because um, when we like the mind is the ultimate trickster in a lot of ways. It's like we just keep biting the apple, from the tree of knowledge. We just keep chomping down on it, wanting to know more and more, but then becoming more and more conscious of our eventual demise, or we become more conscious of the entropy of the universe. And as we learn more factual things, we come to question the very purpose of our universe, the very purpose of our existence, even though it was kind of within our grasp, I think, from the beginning of our lives. Like children, for sure, like understand that the universe in the world is, there is a heart, there is joy, there is laughter, there is the possibility of happiness. Anyways, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but we also just kind of live in this society that's extractionary. It's like, okay, how can I analyze the situation so I can like kind of game the system? How can I come up with a scheme to make more money and then teach people about it online? That to me is like really fucking strange. How there are people out there who, again, kind of instill this mindset in others about growth at all costs. Like, do you really have to make more money every year? Do you really, does your worth really depend on the car you have? Like, I mean, does everybody have to think that way? There's just a lot of pressure for everybody to think that way. And we just put too much of a premium, I think, on like acquisition, domination, conquest, we'll call it. We're kind of in a conquest obsessed world. And it's like, hey, we need people to also play a creative role. We also need people to play a nurturing role. We also need people to, um, well, to do many other things, to be in a position of service, serving others selflessly. And if everybody is channeling their kind of inner masculine urge to dominate and acquire, then the world becomes not sort of one-dimensional. And it's not even non-dualistic. It's like pre-dualist. It's not even able to participate in the duality of the archetypes because everyone is kind of activating their inner masculine to this extreme degree. It's a really strange world that we live in now. And I think that it is a huge reason why the human race is dangerously close to extinction. Actually, it's not just because of AI. It's because maybe we're ignoring the lessons of Jupiter and Cancer. I know not everybody is, but as a collective, I don't know. Are we listening to what Jupiter is teaching us right now? Because Jupiter is teaching us that, hey, like if we want a balanced society, we need to make sure that that children who are being born right now are kind of witnessing a a sort well, they're kind of witnessing a family that has a richer grasp of all the myriad archetypes in the psyche and in the soul, right? Because if children are witnessing, let's say, a family that is purely extractional, and I don't even know if that's a word, but that's the word that always jumps out in my mind. But if they're witnessing a family that is only really focused on capitalizing on as many opportunities as possible, extracting as much wealth as they can out of their environment, competing in every avenue to the bitter end, and trying to achieve the utmost status in their company or in their society or whatever. Like that's a hollow experience. And that's a one-sided experience for that child. And then because they don't receive the other sort of more nurturing aspects of what it means to be in a family, it's like, what does that kid grow up to be? Who does that kid grow up to be? They might grow up to be a little desensitized, borderline narcissistic. They maybe just crave domination as well, growth at all costs. But Jupiter in Cancer is saying, hey, we need to remember that, life is also about being kind of like, well, taking a step back and focusing on self-care, number one, taking a week off, taking a day off insofar as it's possible, not obsessing over growth, and sort of passing that on to your family or your children or whoever or whatever that means to you, whatever family means to you. I'm not saying everybody has to go out there and like have children, but Jupiter and Cancer is reminding us that, there's like a give and take to everything, right? Like Jupiter and Cancer is actually a really important transit right now because it's actually giving us that water. It's giving us that sustenance, that hydration, and that nurturing. And we all have the feminine and masculine archetypes within ourselves, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, I got a massage on Friday, which honestly, for the me 6 years ago, would never do that. Like, I would never invest in like I would never take a self-care day. Like that to me was just so unheard of. But now I'm like, okay, like how can I take care of myself? Because if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of others. And if I'm not taking care of others, and I'm only worrying about how much value can I generate in the marketplace, if I'm thinking about life in that cold way, then I'm not going to be leaving the world a better place. So like we really need to make sure we're leaving the world a better place. And if, and part of that is tapping into our Cancerian ability to play that or to kind of like channel that feminine side. So yeah, and I think that that is maybe the meta point I want to make. It's like, are we leaving the world a better place for humans or for AI? So if we all tap into this desensitized, like robotic aspect of life, then yeah, we're just handing over the keys to AI. So, anyways, I've gone on for a while, but those are kind of the predominant transits in May. I don't think that May is nearly as sort of intense as April. I mean, April played out more or less as I expected. I talked about, go back to the April video. I mean, I said there would be intense battles in the Strait of Hormuz, and even though there weren't like ships being blown up left and right, thank God, there were still blockades and there was a tense sort of stalemate at one point. And to be honest with you, I haven't been tracking the news that much. I've been focused on the Stanley Cup playoffs mostly. Go Wild. But I just think it's unhealthy to be so obsessed with the news. So I've kind of stayed away from it for the most part. The last time I checked, there was a sort of a again, I don't know. I don't know if stalemate's the word, but it kind of feels that way in the Strait. It's like we don't, there seems to be a blockade. The war could very well pick up in May again. I mean, thank God Saturn did seem to represent a cessation of violence. Mars Saturn conjunctions are militaristic, but that doesn't mean that it's an all out attack. I mean, a lot of people with Mars Saturn conjunctions in their birth chart have military come from military families, especially in Aries. Any child that was born in, mid-April probably comes from a military family and probably will join the military themselves. But we saw the enlistment age go up for the U.S. Army. And even as of today, I think the U.S. Is withdrawing like 5,000 troops from Germany. So I at least saw that headline. So, there's some chess pieces being moved around, but nothing like, no event that was like, era defining. There was nothing era defining necessarily about April, but, I talked about April 2026 for years, but I would say that it played out more or less as I expected. Like even from years ago, I said that there would be a war in the Middle East, religiously motivated. And in recent months, I've been talking about how it would be a maritime conflict. That's what it was. Obviously, there's a lot of fuel concerns with oil, oil prices going up and shortages potentially. And Spirit Airlines just went under, not just for that reason of oil prices, but partly. Um, but obviously, Spirit Airlines had filed for bankruptcy many times, or at least one time before. So all I'm saying though is that, much of April played out as I expected. As for May, it's more so like, hey, just charge ahead. Mars does go into Taurus, slows us down a bit. It will square Pluto in the at the end of May, May 25th. Shortly after the Sun and Uranus conjoin for the first time in Gemini in this cycle. I mean, yeah, like May 21st through maybe 28th, that stretch is definitely a little bit fraught with danger. I mean, Mars square Pluto is coercive. It's kind of the energy of a bully. It's domineering. So someone's getting pushed around there. The Sun conjunct Uranus in Gemini might suggest that there's like a world leader who is suddenly changing their position on something, pivoting, doing something unexpected. With Mars square Pluto, maybe it's a financial fight. Maybe there's a merger that's getting blocked in the tech space with the Sun Uranus conjunction. Also, by the way, Mercury will meet up with Uranus and Gemini. That's interesting, right? That's very brilliant intellectually. It's brainstorming a lot of new concepts. So May 17th in particular is going to be a really innovative day for everybody. Moon in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, Uranus in Gemini. Um, and anyways, the last week of May, Venus goes into Cancer. That's focusing on family, familial relationships, focusing on maybe beautifying property, feeling better about being at home a bit, welcoming people to your home. And towards the very end of the month, we do have a Sagittarius full moon, and Venus will square Saturn by that time. The Venus-Saturn square will harken back to a theme from, oh gosh, when was Venus conjunct Saturn? It's been a while. Yeah, from March. So in early March, we had Venus conjunct Saturn in Aries. So March 8th, approximately, think about that time. Did you have a significant shift or conversation in a relationship, like a serious discussion about the future? If so, then around May 30th, 29th, 31st, there might be a follow-up discussion or situation where, you talk to somebody about where you're at, have a check-in. What's the longevity of our relationship or this business partnership? Or you might feel a little more conservative with your money. Now, the Jupiter-Venus conjunction will not happen until June. I'll talk about that next month. But yeah, all in all, May should be a little bit more lighthearted than April, more social for sure. I still think the Mars-Pluto square could absolutely cause a lot of chaos in mundane astrology. I mean, I'm not tracking specific countries' charts here, but even like the Mars-Jupiter square in the next couple days is big for the US chart because the US has a Cancer stellium. So, Mars and Aries definitely could create some tension. Hopefully not an uptick in violence, but the early part of May does look slightly violent. But nothing really compares to what's coming in July. I mean, look at July 4th even of 2026. Chiron switching into Taurus, Mars conjunct Uranus in Gemini in the US's seventh house. We've seen the Mars-Uranus cycle get really rowdy ever since Pluto went into Uranus's sign. So every time Mars and Uranus aspect each other, you know, Uranus acts as the dispositor of Pluto. And that intensifies the revolutionary nature of Mars Uranus aspects, but also it increases the risk of political violence. Pluto in Aquarius. That's kind of like vigilante. That's sort of grassroots sorts of extreme movements. And also Uranus and Mars will still be at the bending of the lunar nodes. So, early July is a time that I know a lot of people have asked me about. Oh, what's coming in July? Should I, quote unquote, leave the US or whatever? I think I talked about this last time too, but like the locational astrologers have really, sunk their teeth into the clickbait aspects of social media. I mean, they've really taken advantage of the whole like, you can create a lot of anxiety for people by saying, "Oh, this location is fucked on this day." I think that's super irresponsible because, you know, it's like you're basically taking a hammer and watching all these ants flee away. And it's like you don't want to do that because, people really hang on your words. If you're a spiritual teacher and you take your work seriously, or at least you pretend to, like people are gonna like, or even if you don't take your work seriously, but you just make a TikTok and it goes viral, like people just assume that you know what you're talking about because you got 100,000 likes. But I don't buy into this idea that certain locations are destined to be epicenters of violence just because a transit, is exact and culminating over that location or rising in this location or whatever. Now, just to be clear, I don't discredit locational astrology and astrocartography, but there are certain branches of locational astrology that have really taken off in the last few months. And it's like partly because people were calling out how the Gulf states, are posing are a risky, are risky to be in right now. But it's like a lot of those videos were made around the same time that governments were issuing travel warnings for the Gulf states anyways. And if you look at some of the lines, they didn't exactly cross in the areas that they were talking about. So I want to also, full disclosure, say this that like my account and my page is not centered around locational astrology. So I'm not speaking for all the techniques of locational astrology. If you come to me for a reading and you ask me, what's the best place to live for this or that, I can do that, of course. If you ask me, what's my relocation chart look like in this other city where I live or wherever I live now, of course I can assess that. But I'm not in the business personally. This isn't my bread and butter of like telling people, oh, you shouldn't travel here today on this exact day because Mars and Uranus are conjoining on the midheaven of this location. That's not my that's just not my line of work. And I'm fine with that. But I think a lot of locational astrologers have, you know, instilled anxiety, especially around the 4th of July, talking about LA. It's like, okay, like I understand why they're highlighting LA, but I also don't think that people should be running away from and like that people should not be literally like booking one-way tickets out of their like country because they heard some astrologer like warn you about a specific location. Because for every one time that they get that right, there's 50 other times that the location is unaffected, despite the culmination or anti-culmination or setting or rising of these planets, or even when they're at parent in parents or whatever. So again, even insofar as I'm not specializing in locational astrology through my page, I don't in the sense that I don't track, the transits to a certain locale every day. Even that withstanding, I I think I'm definitely in my right to call out that branch of astrologers right now, in terms of, their insistence on scattering, people away from like their homes. And again, Jupiter and Cancer, stop fucking worrying about yourself only. Stop saying, well, I'm trying to leave, this state right now because I heard some astrologer tell me that this state's going to break the fuck off the US today because of this transit. It's like, yeah, but like, did you forget that your grandmother lives in the same town and you're taking care of her? Like, what are you going to do about that? So I'm just like, no, and I'll stop picking on, the locational astrologers, but I just think in general, we live in this atomized world already. The last thing we need is to keep feeding the fear to a point where we're all living in bunkers, separate from our peers and our families. Like, what the fuck? So it's almost like the meta point that I'm making today is that, okay, we have a lot of fire and air in the sky, and that's exuberant and all of that. But it's also part of the yang polarity and the masculine archetype, which I think we already are channeling a lot in our society. And not from a muscular standpoint. I mean, I brought this up on a panel last week at the Philosophical Research Society. I was like, you know, we literally lack a core. I mean, a lot of us sit down all day, we just type away, and we wouldn't be able to like physically scale up a revolution anyways. But even like if our physicality is not what it used to be, um, because again, we're just biting from the apple of knowledge all day. Uh, even if that's the case, our mindset is very masculine, right? It's like all about conquest and domination and acquisition. And the fire and air energy is just going to accentuate that. Okay, so what's the result? Again, people in survival mode, people in I'll move wherever the fuck to just get a level up on this corporate ladder. I'll leave. And look, I don't live where my family lives, so I'm maybe a hypocrite there. But really, like we make a lot of choices for the betterment of our position in the marketplace. We're willing to move wherever to make that happen. We're willing to say or do whatever to make that happen. And, in some ways, it's kind of an ugly world. So don't forget, Jupiter's in Cancer for another 2 months and um or something like that. And just find it in your heart. Take care of yourself emotionally, physically, and find it in your heart to take care of the people who are important to you. I know we're all competing with the dopamine rush of a screen. You're watching me right now on a shitty Zoom call, and somehow you're still watching me. It's because we want to know. It's like we want to know what's going on. We want information so that we increase our survival odds. I think that's where it's a primitive instinct. We want to know what's out there. We want to know if there's a predator out there. And we want to believe that if we understand astrology, we can minimize the odds of getting ensnared in a bad situation or being caught by the predator. But again, it's just I don't know. It's just like this weird prioritization in our brains where it's like we prioritize gaining this information, whatever it is, and looking at these screens, even to the detriment of our, relationships and connections and our family and all that. So, it's a strange schema inside of our minds. This is interesting calculus. But Jupiter and Cancer is saying, hey, remember again that we gotta nurture the people that we actually care about also if we want to survive, if we want to pass down our genes even. So, anyways, we have a new moon in Taurus, by the way, on May 16th. It's at the 25th degree. Someone on TikTok told me, "Oh, it's out of sign conjunct. It's an out of sign conjunction with Uranus." I mean, 6 degrees off, different signs. I don't really agree. Um, I really think the fixed signs are starting a new journey, May 16th with the new moon. Really stepping into hopefully more stable territory, honestly, now that Uranus is not in the fixed modality. And Venus disposits the new moon from Gemini. Venus and Gemini sextile Chiron and Mars, with Mars conjunct Chiron, is showing that maybe there's a conversation that's happening that's slightly upsetting, but at the same time, it's maybe helping you stand up for yourself in a different way. You're showing your resilience and your fortitude. But I think ultimately this Taurus new moon is a great chance to, find contentment in the things that are right in front of you. And then we have a Sag full moon on May 31st. And this one is, sorry, bear with me for a second. I gotta queue up change the settings quick. Okay, so yeah, it's at the ninth degree. It's conjunct Antares. And we had a new moon in Sagittarius in 2024 that was conjunct Antares. Let me find that. December 1st, 2024. Yes, that's when it was. So yeah, December 1st, 2024. Think about where you were. That's when we had a new moon at the exact same degree as the full moon in Sag a year and a half later. So Antares is the crusader, the berserker in some respects. Yeah, it's the warrior, it's the fighter in the Crusades, in the religious battle. So the full moon on May 31st, it could bring up themes of faith, discrepancies in faith between you and someone else. Could reveal to you what you really believe. It could give you reasons to be optimistic. And it's disposited by Jupiter, which is in Cancer, starting to get that conjunction with Venus. Venus is getting closer to applying that conjunction. I think ultimately it's I hesitate. I hesitated because I almost said it's a feel good full moon, but I feel like that would be some mediocre astrology analysis because Mars is inconjunct to the moon. And by the way, I talked about the inconjunct from Mars to this full moon back, 7, 8 months ago when I did my 2026 horoscopes. And by the way, if you haven't downloaded the 2026 horoscopes, you should, because then you can just skip the rest of this video and already get, the insights on not only this full moon, but all the subsequent new and full moons for the year. But yeah, Mars is in conjunct to the moon. I have a Mars moon in conjunct to my birth chart, although the inconjunct is applying to a balsamic moon, so it's nowhere near as hyped up as this one. If someone was born, anyone who's ends up getting birthed into the world at this exact time is going to be pretty loud, rambunctious, pretty volatile, and irritable, honestly. I mean, Mars in conjunct the moon is what I call the Larry David aspect. It's kind of like there's a rock in the shoe kind of feeling, kind of complaining about everything. And, he does it in a funny way, but I'm pretty sure Larry David has a Mars moon in conjunct, but there's sort of that, well, this is kind of bothering me. This situation's kind of bothering me. This store associate is kind of bothering me. Mars moon in conjunct is just like everything kind of bothers them. But Mars in conjunct to a full moon, which is already powerful, is a little bit more almost pissed off and getting pissed off about something. So, yeah, I would say it's a little bit of an irritable full moon, but disposited by Jupiter and Neptune, disposited by Jupiter and Cancer co-present with Venus. I mean, there is some feel good rushes of dopamine there. So, with the Cancerian themes, maybe it's you're speaking about your faith within your family, or you're changing your beliefs about whether or not you want to raise a family. And I feel like people who are watching my horoscopes probably want to start a family even more than they used to. I actually probably doubt that, but um, I don't know. I'm just trying to help save humanity here. I'm trying to convince people to start families with Jupiter and Cancer. Um, I just want to say one more thing about that. It seems like nobody wants to start a family nowadays. Like most people that I talk to, at least in like the big metropolises, I can't speak for like small town USA to be honest. But for like the big cities, like bigger than my hometown of St. Paul, Minneapolis, like I'm talking like a Los Angeles, a Chicago, a New York, a Miami, maybe even like a Seattle. There's just like this aversion to, raising a family. And why is that? Obviously, it's because partly because their own childhoods were traumatic. Why is that? I already described why. Because the whole family was sort of in a masculine orientation towards dominance in the marketplace and out of maybe even just financial necessity, just work, work, work. It's all Saturnian in that way too. But also people don't want to start a family because it prevents them from kind of being the star of the show, right? And I'm not going to sit here and pathologize everybody. I'm not going to say, oh, we live in a world of narcissists. Everyone's a narcissist. I think that would be really kind of unfair, right? Of me to just like project something at my audience, like, oh, everybody's a narcissist, because I think that would say a lot more about me than it would about my audience. However, I think we could still just make a general claim here that, you know, having children, raising a family is a huge sacrifice because you're basically it's not that every aspiration in your life disappears, but you obviously have to put your child's needs first from then on for the rest of your life. And you basically exclude yourself from participating in certain experiences for a while that sort of are more youthful. Like, it's harder to go to a party, it's harder to just go to a club or something. You're sort of you have these obligations now. And yes, one could argue that it does prevent someone from feeding their narcissism in a lot of ways, because now they have to care about a kid and they can't go out there and, again, just, receive validation for something they were doing before. And I understand that like narcissists have children and they end up kind of trying to make their mold their child in their image and sort of get bragging rights to their kids. But anyways, for a lot of people, they're just not willing to make that sacrifice because again, they don't want to witness the death of their old life where they could just kind of like freely move about and, you know, just yeah, sort of again, do what they want, dictate their own timelines, not have to worry about someone else's needs. Like people in general, I don't think they want to provide for others. It's not that it's not in our DNA, but it's just been kind of, siphoned out of us because, what actually, speaking of growth at all costs, what actually drives GDP growth? I mean, a lot of things do, but like one of the things that drives growth in a capitalistic society is, you know, lust and individuality, aspirations to like be the best at something, aspirations to be seen, witnessed, to have status. It's like, why would you buy the Hermes bag? It's because you fucking, you want to have status above and beyond others. That's like your way of being the alpha in the kingdom, whatever. But if our society emphasized a more holistic set of traits, like caring for others and not needing to be number one always, like that would have a depressing effect on consumption. So we live in a consumptive society. And so, naturally, the powers that be don't want any downward effect on consumption. So we have to consume media content that sort of upholds youth as, just superior to old age. It's like we're force fed all this stuff that says you have to be forever young, otherwise you're irrelevant. You have to listen to music about one night stands because it's more fun. You have to watch other people's social media content at the party and then have FOMO and want to go to that party. And, we're all kind of overcompensating in one area. And it's all very masculine, like I'm saying. It's all very much about conquest, and just kind of like getting ahead of others. And it's like, why are we so one-sided about everything like that? It's because again of the stimuli in our environment, in our media, in the brands themselves, and again with advertising. It's always been thus since at least the days of Edward Bernays, but really all it's doing is ensuring our demise, right? Because then it's like, well, I kind of want to worry about me because everyone else fucking sucks. Everyone else is annoying. That seems to be the subconscious thesis. And so my hope and my wish for everybody watching this is not necessarily to live a specific life, because that again would be very restrictive of me, and I think that would almost not really be, very, I'm not trying to control people is what I'm saying, but I am just trying to like point these things out that we all kind of have maybe like tunnel vision by default just by participating in this society. If we kind of open up the fan and think about the entire human experience, like, yeah, maybe having a child, having children, raising a family is part of life's rich tapestry. And of course, we all want to investigate maybe why we don't want to raise a family. Well, yeah, maybe it's because the relationship between you and your mother at the very outset was fractured by something. Maybe it was that your mother had to go right back to work by the time you're three weeks old or something, or maybe um, your parents just like didn't nurture you emotionally. They just cared more about what can you do for me? How can you can you perform well in school and then and get a good job? And otherwise we don't, it's like all conditional. Like was the love conditional? And of course you have to investigate those things and heal those family wounds, but eventually, you know, those revelations, those insights, the transcendence of that pain will guide you towards the right person. And then there you go. Suddenly you have a child together. And that's the original manifestation. Everyone talks about manifestation. And again, I think we live in this weird, twisted, inverted world where it's all about manifesting money, manifesting status, manifesting the best partner. But it's from a very acquisitional perspective. So it's like that partner, you don't unconditionally love them. You're never going to. It's all about they're a trophy for you to show you that to show others that to signal to others that you have status in the marketplace. And then what happens? What are you just gonna be with them until you can find someone even better? So I think we have to remind ourselves that the original manifestation is the union of these two forces on the axis of duality, and the union of those forces creates the Vesica Piscis, which is the portal that we all pass through to be born into this world. Although, unfortunately, 30% of births are C-sections now, so people aren't even passing through the Vesica Piscis anymore, which I think is a big problem. So people aren't even coming into the world naturally. They're not being raised very naturally. It's not holistic, it's not wholesome. And so why would we want to partake in creation at that point when our own creation was somewhat harsh, I guess? And there's a lot of fear that's instilled in our society around birth and the birth experience that, oh, it has to be like you see in the movies where it's this, you know, it's just the most intense, and it is intense, of course. But I understand I'm saying all this as a man who will never actually give birth to a child. But I'm just saying, insofar as I've at least, heard from many people who are mothers and fathers and had discussions, very thorough discussions with people about this. Like there are there are ways in which the human body is built in a certain way to be able to give birth, and it has for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And it's only in recent human history that we've suddenly intervened medically in a way that instills, I think, only just instills more fear around it when there is actually, and I'm saying this because I've talked to people who have given birth in a very just natural way, like whether it's at home or just with a doula guiding them, breathing their baby out. Like there is a sacred nature, of course, to the birth, and it doesn't have to be this experience of like looking for disaster, waiting for disaster to strike. And I just think that again, we when we have a traumatic birth or we have a traumatic upbringing where our mother is like very detached from us because she's off, again, I'm not saying that she's doing it in a malicious way, but the mother, maybe due to financial necessity or otherwise, is just, kind of has to do other stuff. And like in a lot of ways, can't prioritize the child. That is going to limit the child's ability to trust the world. Or if they're left to just cry it out. I think even that absolutely will dent their ability to trust the world. They basically accept their death and they stop crying. Oh, little Johnny never cried. Never cried after 3 weeks. Was always a good kid. Well, didn't cry because Johnny gave up, you know? So as that child grows, they have very limited capacity to build relationships because the first person they were meant to trust kind of abandoned them, at least in their eyes, even if they didn't technically abandon the child. So Again, there are very deep roots. I'm not trying to say that people are inherently immoral or bad or whatever, but yes, we do skew towards being selfish in our day and age, and we are deeply traumatized by our childhoods in a way that we cannot even grasp necessarily because we don't have conscious memories of it. But the very like the birthing industry itself can to me is worth scrutinizing, at least in the US. Like, why does the medical intervention have to look the way it does? Why do we need that high of a percentage of C-sections? Why does the mother walk into birth already expecting disaster in the worst case scenario? Right. And so I'm expecting by the time Jupiter finishes this transit through Cancer, that the birthing space will have grown a little bit and changed, and that maybe there will be a little bit of a mind-opening experience for a lot of people, influential people, maybe where they start to look at birth differently, or maybe initiatives taken by countries to try to, convince their populations to birth children. And it's a huge issue. I mean, I don't think it's talked about enough. And it's not talked about because, again, it doesn't drive sales, it doesn't drive dollars. Like, these are the subjects that humanity hinges on. It's like our decision making around whether or not we, want to partake in the alchemy of life and, and whether or not we want to partake in the original manifestation. Like, we have those choices in our hands right now. So if we choose not to partake in the primordial manifestation, literally, this is the source of the Big Bang, right? The union of these positive and negative charges in a way. And I'm not saying I know what the fucking Big Bang actually looked like, but whenever I go there and meditate on it, to me it seems very obvious that the universe is powered by love. And what is love? It is the attraction of two opposite forces. And I'm not trying to gender this. I'm not trying to put us all in these boxes here, by the way. I'm talking about archetypally. But the universe itself absolutely is a meeting of these two opposing forces, the sort of overlapping or collision of which, you know, creates a new entity, that being the universe. The union, two people creating a third person. That's the secrets of the universe are revealed in the procreative process, right? And there are more complex universes where it's actually a trifecta of three forces, four. So you can have a trialistic universe, quadralistic universe, I think a quintilistic. I don't know if that's a word, but a quintality. You can have a quintality instead of a duality, where there's everything is participating in a factor. There's a factor of five for everything. So like, instead of hot and cold in this universe, hot versus cold, up versus down, left versus right, there would be, five factors to consider for every possible phenomenon. And those universes are way more complex than ours. But anyways, we're in this very dense world here. And, you know, again, I just think, again, just like reflect on why you're clicking on the video that's all about how to acquire more things. And think about why no one's message to do otherwise ever resonates with you. Right? Because how many times have you heard someone say this kind of stuff? Oh, don't obsess so much over materials or, your status in society. I mean, don't be vain. Oh, don't have narcissistic qualities or something. How many times people said that and then it just falls on deaf ears? Well, it's kind of because of this Jupiter and Cancer stuff I'm talking about. It's because we literally witnessed examples through our parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles or whoever that life is just about pretty much trying to get ahead, trying to outcompete, or just trying to survive. But I think but at least through the media, even if your family isn't that way, the media is pressuring you to be a good little consumer, to care deeply about whether or not you have something that's relevant or trending or the latest and greatest this or that. Like that is wired into you. So that's why, of course, the idea of having a family is like completely anathema to how you operate. And I'm sure that most of you, after watching this video, are going to be like, why was Evan going on and on about, raising families? That's such a boring ass topic. I don't pay this guy to do that kind of stuff. I pay this guy to tell me whether or not I'm going to meet my partner next week. But again, I implore you to think about why are you even searching for that person? What are you going to do with that person? Are you just going to have a very transactional like relationship where it's all about the zenith of pleasure that you can reach, which fair enough, we all love going up there too. Like I love going up there, but it's not just about that. It's not just about, you're not are you just trying to fill a void? Are you trying to fill a void without consequence, without partaking in the alchemy of life, without partaking in the original manifestation? I mean, I obviously, well, I don't know if it's, well, I'm a quadruple Scorpio, so it is pretty obvious, but I haven't pursued a life of celibacy. I haven't, I'm not a monk, but you could even argue that, using our energy, giving our energy to someone just for pleasure and then not ever using it to kind of create life. I mean, it is kind of strange in a lot of ways. And I know that there's people watching this too who are going to be like, well, I want that, but there's not a lot of great options. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of women watching this who would say, like, well, there's not a lot of available men, or the men that sometimes are available are like secretly emotionally unaware when it matters, and they don't provide a financial security. They don't provide the container for me. They're not, dependable at all. Like, I understand that there are so many nuances to this discussion. And in no way am I pinning it all on a single person or type of person, but I'm just saying it's in the cultural milieu that like we are just discouraged from doing that, from, truly like procreating, right? Because again, the subliminal messaging is that your life is pretty much over at that point. But why does it have to be over at that point? Let's just ask ourselves that question. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, the comment I hear most often, the response I hear most often from all of this is like women telling me that like there's just not like great men available. And like I totally understand like what you're saying. I do readings for people all the time, right? And they talk about this. They talk about how, I do readings for amazing people who have a lot of skills, a lot of potential, or they're even self-actualized already, but they can't like kind of find someone that they click with. And sometimes it's because it's maybe where you live. Maybe there's been an exodus from your town. You don't have a lot of options in your geographical area. Maybe you've just had some bad luck. But also, just realize that there is an undercurrent of values in our society that mostly values consumption. So naturally, it's going to be really hard to find someone who's actually willing. And again, and I'm absolutely talking to the men here as well. I think my audience is like 16% men, according to most platforms, but on YouTube, it actually might be a little bit higher. But to the men watching this, like, I'm looking at you too. I'm looking at everyone here. Like everybody I think in our society has some amount of aversion to the idea of sacrificing something they were doing in order to have a child and raise a family. So, and I know a lot of guys who just try to keep playing the field and never get to the next stage of a relationship. And yeah, I mean, again, that is a waste of a lot of potential because you could be that provider, you could be that reliable counterpart, and you're kind of not stepping into your masculine fully when you only view women as like opportunity for conquest. I mean, that's not exactly a higher frequency of the masculine. So, anyways, I've gone way over time. with my schedule. I have to film a music video tomorrow for 12 hours, which I'm happy about. My first single will be coming out some point in the near future. So I'm gonna do a quick rundown today. Again, the reason, and I talk about this a lot, but the reason I'm not going to go through the horoscopes in depth is because I already did that with my 2026 horoscopes. So if you want more depth on May, what it means for your rising sign and your sun and moon, go over to my website and download the 2026 horoscopes. Okay, so for Aries, you continue to have energy, even more energy this month because you're uninhibited by Saturn and Neptune. So Aries, really go for it this month, lunge into new experiences, go on new adventures. The Taurus new moon, May 16th, is an opportunity for you to financially stabilize around something new that you're doing, or to indulge in something pleasurable, to get creative again. As the month rolls on, towards the end of the month, there's a Sagittarius full moon in your ninth house. So at the end of the month, you could be changing your philosophy on something, completing an educational journey, returning from or even going on a journey abroad or long distance. And with Jupiter in the fourth, dispositing the full moon, I generally think that Aries should have some amount of camaraderie and good times within their family this month, which is nice. And by the way, Mars will be in Taurus for the second half of the month, so a lot of indulgences maybe, or yeah, maybe a little stress around money at some point, but ideally it's just motivation to make money when Mars is there. Venus in your third for half the month, it's social. As Venus goes into the fourth, like I said, a little bit more of a joie de vivre in the family. Taurus, the new moon is in your sign May 16th, so that's a nice steady ground that you'll discover without Uranus in your sign for the first time really in basically 7 years. And so hopefully you find stability there. Mars is in your 12th though, along with Saturn for the first half of the month. So pay attention to your mental health. I mean, a lot of Tauruses maybe are feeling distraught or trapped in their own minds, or feeling like their subconscious is a source of a lot of frustration, right? There's a lot of frustration somewhere buried deep down in the unconscious, I should say, because the subconscious is more the eighth house. But I'm just saying, like, in the 12th house, it's almost like other people's anger is seeping into you, into your aura. So, Taurus, you're probably really frustrated, honestly, right now. With Saturn in the 12th, I think a lot of Tauruses realize that the old career needs to die. And I think you're, over the next 2 years, slowly letting go of something you used to commit to back in 2020 to 2023 when Saturn was in your 10th. But because Uranus is out of your first now, again, things should become more predictable, and you can really just anchor yourself, especially around what you value. Venus is in the second for half the month. So there's some focus on finances. Then it goes into the third, where you may have more joyful, pleasant conversations. You might invest in teaching, writing, communications. And then Mars goes into your sign. Mars goes into Taurus May 18th. And at that time, you are going to feel very directed, assertive, action oriented, taking initiative. Watch out for when Mars squares Pluto. You might get into big argument, especially with a parent or a boss or manager. The Sag full moon, May 31st, is in your eighth house. So that's a transition in terms of investments, maybe. Big moment for your investments. Maybe you pay off debt. Maybe you realize something about your finances. Potentially a subconscious insight floats to the surface. But yeah, ultimately, Taurus, I think the first half of the month, you're working through a lot of unconscious material. And it's more about letting go and getting sleep. A lot of Tauruses are maybe having a little bit of trouble with sleep right now. But if you have good sleep hygiene this month, it should be all right. Gemini, pretty solid month for you. I gotta be honest, the earth and water signs have a bit of a confusing month because starting really the rest of 2026 can be a little confusing for earth and water signs, which is why they especially should get my 2026 horoscopes. But You can see how a Taurus, there's just like a lot of 12th house energy, so it's more about like purging and ending cycles. Like Tauruses are seriously ending more cycles than any sign right now because Saturn in the 12th is saying, hey, you got to shed some of those old foundations before you start like really fresh when Saturn goes into Taurus with some long-term commitment. So Taurus, like entire eras are ending. Gemini, I mean, Saturn's coming down from your 10th house. So you're more focused on like what you can manifest in communities and with friendships, what kind of allegiances, alliances, I guess, can you build within your communities? Um, can you build an organization? Can you build long-term traction on social media, maybe? Can you build a presence long-term through the technological world or whatever? But anyways, in May for Geminis, Venus is in your sign for the first half. That's obviously charming, attractive, social, feel good. It's good for building relationships even. And then it goes into your second. So your self-esteem will be really good at the end of May, I think. It's going to help you attract maybe more money if that's the goal you're after. Hopefully you paid attention to the rest of the video. But yeah, if you're after some amount of money, then yeah, go for it. And then also we have the new moon in Taurus in your 12th. I mean, that's a spiritual, pensive kind of new moon. Maybe your natural surroundings will be spiritually inspiring. Maybe you'll adopt a different, yeah, spiritual practice, or there's a dream that you're having at night that is interesting to you. I mean, the 12th house new moon in Taurus, I think, is a lot more about just like having a sacred connection to nature. Or, yes, potentially finding groundedness in your spiritual life or feeling that your mental health is becoming more stable or something. Um, but yeah, also Mars is in the 11th house until May 18th. That could spell conflict with friends or community members, but at the same time, it can just help you take charge of a group where you'll feel competitive and compete on a sports team. And when Mars goes into your 12th, that's when you have to watch out for sleep hygiene, be getting enough sleep and all of that. And your dreams at night could be a little violent when Mars goes into Taurus because it's in your 12th. And also Geminis, you're gonna have to clear your energy frequently when Mars goes into your 12th, because then that's when you're more likely to absorb other people's anger unintentionally, unconsciously. And then the Sag full moon, May 31st in your seventh house, could mark the ending of a relationship or just an emotional outpouring in a relationship, generally. And then, with Jupiter dispositing the full moon in your second house, maybe it's a lucrative agreement even. Cancer, I mean, a pretty high stakes month. Mars in the 10th. You maybe want to jump to new heights in your career, take a risk that hopefully pays off in your career. With Saturn in your 10th, maybe you're just kind of over it. Maybe you're not interested anymore in a career that you used to have. With Mars there, it's giving you the impetus to charge ahead though. But it could just be that you're stepping into something new, taking again bigger risks to either stand apart from others in your career or to go in a new direction. The Venus transit in the 12th, it could show that you're maybe flirting with people a little bit behind the scenes. So Cancer is like, don't have an affair ever, but especially right now. Other Cancers are maybe, well, the Venus in the 12th house could help you actually end a pattern in a relationship. It could help you close out a relationship cycle, or you'll find more pleasure in your spiritual practices, or maybe when you isolate and meditate, it's just more enjoyable. And your dreams could like facilitate creativity. And in rare cases, a relationship from a past life or something could come back. But then the Taurus new moon, May 16th, is in your 11th. So you might stabilize around a new friendship, a new community. Maybe you're partaking in a new type of social media content. I mean, I'm a Cancer rising, and Uranus in my 11th house in the last 7 years definitely helped me go viral. And now that Uranus is out of my 11th and there's a new moon coming up in my 11th, I'm definitely planning to like post content of my music video, right? Clips of it, and to kind of establish myself again. I used to be a little bit more focused on music, but I'm reestablishing myself for sure in May as a musician and an artist. And my social media isn't going to look drastically different. So don't freak out and be like, well, Evan's giving up on astrology. I promise you don't have to worry about that stuff. But either way, I'm going to be posting my music, and that's absolutely an expression, a new type of expression for me in the 11th house. Sort of old expression too, but anyways, the point is it's a new type of content for me. Um, and then, in the last part of the month, Venus goes into Cancer. So Cancer's towards the end of the month, you're feeling maybe well connected, like you're getting along with people quite easily, and maybe spending money on clothes, things that help you, just kind of feel better about your presentation. And so Cancers are going to have a little bit of a glow up while Venus is in Cancer. You could attract more money, you could attract a relationship, but mostly I think Cancers are just going to be, you know, investing in themselves in a way that heightens their or just sort of amplifies their presence, makes them a little bit more charming in a way. But yeah, don't forget you have Saturn in your 10th. So Cancers, you're all kind of pushing up against a lot of resistance. And it's taking you a lot of effort to like rise the ranks, whatever you're trying to do in your career. But you can do it right now with Mars in your 10th. And then Mars will go into your 11th, by the way, and May 18th, and that could um, lead to some competition, competitiveness with friends or communities. And some arguments could come up with a friend, but ultimately, I think it just, you know, uh, galvanizes you to, kind of immerse yourself in social environments. So Leo, Mars and Aries will continue, through your ninth house until May 18th. Mars and Aries is in the ninth, kind of giving you the courage to vocalize your philosophies on life. Maybe you're contending with other diverging philosophies and having to argue your case for something. Some of you are traveling to new places, places you've never been, but maybe arguing with someone over parts of the trip. The new moon in Taurus, May 16th is in your 10th, so that could beget a new career beginning, potentially a new public reputation. And Uranus was in your 10th for a long time. So you're kind of like, okay, hopefully the storm is starting to dissipate in my career house. I've tried a bunch of different things. I've experimented. I've gone through ups and downs. Now I'm ready to stabilize around a career that really makes sense for me, that really harmonizes with my values. It's also a social month, Venus in the 11th for the first half of the month. So the first half, surround yourself with friends, people in your community, have a good laugh. Just kind of laugh, get it out. Venus goes into the 12th after that. And with Jupiter in the 12th, it could improve your mental health. Could also just mean that when you're like giving yourself some alone time, it actually brings you peace, which is always good. And then I didn't even talk about the Sag full moon for Cancer. Sorry. For Cancers, the Sag full moon, May 31st, is in your sixth house. So that's like a health change, maybe a health revelation or completion of I don't know, you hit a fitness milestone or a completion of a work project. And with Jupiter dispositing in your first, all that effort, I think, is paying off and putting you in a good position. And it's increasing your opportunities. I mean, whatever kind of like work Cancers finish at the end of the month, it is opening new doors for them. Leo, the Sag full moon's in your fifth. Could be a romantic outing. It could be that you're sort of, yeah, I mean, maybe finishing up a creative project, actually. I actually know some Leo risings who are finishing up a big creative project at the end of the month. Maybe some of you will just go on a date that's really memorable for you. Disposited by Jupiter in the 12th. Maybe there's a connection there between your dream life, your spiritual life, and your creativity. Virgo. So Virgo, you have Mars propelling himself through Aries through May 18th, the eighth house. With Mars in the eighth, maybe you feel vengeful, bitter, resentful about something. You got to transmute that. The eighth house is about transformation. Transform all that bitterness or anger to a higher plane, a higher frequency. Turn it into motivation. Other Virgos are arguing about money, finances, fighting with a partner about who owns what. If you're a Virgo who's been trying to start a business, this is a good time, continues to be a good time to start a business. And the new moon in Taurus, May 16th, is in your ninth. That could be you taking a flight. You're traveling somewhere, maybe starting a new educational path, even starting to publish something. Venus in the 10th for the first half of the month. That helps you incorporate creativity into your career. It helps you maybe gain a better reputation in your career. Maybe you connect with an executive a little bit more strategically and in a way that benefits you. And then Venus goes into the 11th in the second half of the month. That should really be the time when Virgos are socializing a lot. So May 18th through mid-June is basically the most fortuitous social period of the year for you. And any connections you make in the second half of May would definitely improve your network and maybe even lead to more income or a better job in the near future. And when Mercury goes into Gemini, I haven't talked about Mercury much today, but when Mercury goes into Gemini, conjuncts Uranus in your 10th, you're going to be generating a lot of unique ideas and concepts in your career, or you'll communicate something to people very suddenly about maybe being a parent, or you will unlock a new innovative idea, in your career. Mars will go into Taurus in your ninth in the second half of the month. So energized to travel, to learn, maybe fighting, disagreeing about philosophy with someone, but ultimately, I just think it's going to motivate you to kind of venture maybe geographically or intellectually into new territory. The Sag full moon, May 31st, is in your fourth house. That could mark a transition to a new home. Maybe you're relocating or having a deep insight about your family and their faith. Maybe there's a big change in your perception of your family, or you either connect with them or diverge with them about something Sagittarian, which could be like your faith, your philosophy. Libra, yeah, I mean, this is a tough time. Mars, Saturn in your seventh. Yeah, you probably need a break from some people. Some of you are getting divorced right now, separating from someone, almost breaking up, but staying together anyways. I mean, Libras, I can't tell you what to do in your relationship, but definitely you're deciding whether or not it's worth the fight. Can your relationship get through Mars and Aries? That's the big question I have. There's a little, the Aries full moon in late September this year is also going to test your relationships. But this is really the biggest test. So Libra, if you're not broken up by May 18th, then that's a good sign the relationship can probably survive. If you do break up before May 18th, then you're one of probably millions of Libras, especially Libra risings, who, realize that the relationship just wasn't resilient enough, and that's just opening the door to someone better in the future, maybe. Even Libra Venuses are maybe going through a separation right now. Other Libras are just fighting over a contract, or they're negotiating something fiercely. The Taurus new moon in your eighth house, though, May 18th, or sorry, May 16th, that will help you kind of get your footing in a financial context. Maybe invest in something new. Maybe your finances become more predictable, maybe in a good way. Maybe you unite resources with somebody, start a business with somebody, incorporate with someone. But Mars will go into the eighth house on May 18th, and that could show some frustration with money or finances or debt. But ultimately, I just think for Libras, you're mostly gonna remember the first half of the month as the time when your relationships were really put through the ringer. Venus in the ninth, though, means that maybe you're having a good time if you travel in the first half of the month, or um, you are relating with people over these high level discussions. And I mean, with the ninth house kind of encompassing relatives, maybe you're harmonizing with them a little bit more. And then Venus, when it goes into Cancer in your 10th, on May 18th, you definitely could monetize something in your career, make more money in your career, have a better reputation. Sorry about the car alarm in the background. LA just it's like that. But Venus in the 10th absolutely could, alongside Jupiter, help you attract more success in your career. And that's really nice. So Libras, between the new moon in the 8th and Venus and Jupiter in the 10th, I actually do think that you could be gaining some kind of financial ground in your career. Maybe it helps you invest in something, or maybe you're investing in something that somehow connects to your career growth. Yeah. So I think the second half of the month hopefully is a little bit calmer, but the first half of the month feels like everyone is duking it out with you. You know, it's a battle. It's a constant battle. And at the very least, you're learning how to be more independent. You're learning if your relationships are actually, again, resilient enough. And we all need that pressure test sometimes. Scorpio, oh, sorry, I didn't finish. The Sag full moon for Libras, May 31st, is in the third house. Third house full moon, emotional conversation may come up. Maybe you're completing a book, just finishing reading a book, writing a book, finishing an educational path, traveling, taking an important road trip, and disposited by Jupiter in the 10th. Most likely, you will actually have a very significant conversation pertaining to your career, and hopefully it's it's good news about your career or something, or you're kind of saying something to someone at the right time, and it aids you in your career. Scorpio, avoid injury while Mars is in Aries until May 18th. I unfortunately didn't fully take my own advice, and I'm recovering from a slight tweak in my right shoulder. But I still was able to pull back or hold, like, kind of, you know, give my shoulder a rest early on when I was showing signs of soreness because I knew that Mars was in a sixth house aspect to my sun and moon, even though I'm not a Scorpio rising. I'm definitely experiencing the Mars and Aries transit in this way. But Scorpio risings, especially, you're building muscle mass, probably you're going to the gym, working out more, trying to build your core strength, but avoid injury for sure, especially on May 16th there when Mars is conjunct Chiron. And Saturn's in the sixth. So your body might be stiffening a little bit. So really keep yourself, you know, limber and take a Pilates class or something. Also, you're working a lot. Scorpios are working really hard right now, diligently with Mars in the industrious sixth house. And then Venus is in Gemini in the eighth, so you're developing a psychic or sexual connection with someone, maybe a financial connection, maybe spending a lot of money, investing in yourself, investing in your projects, investing in your portfolio. The Taurus new moon, May 16th, is in your seventh house. So if you're single, maybe a new relationship comes up. Otherwise, maybe you're just finding more stability in your relationship, aligning with people who share similar values, having pleasant experiences with others, maybe creating something with others. Taurus is creative. And then in the second half of the month, Venus goes into the ninth in Cancer. Maybe you spend a lot of money on travels, you're planning some upcoming trips. Maybe you harmonize quite well with your relatives. Maybe you start to make money off of teaching. Maybe you spend money on a class. By the way, Mars goes into Taurus May 18th in your seventh house. That's when you might be fighting a little bit with a partner, but more likely you're just feeling more independent and in your relationships. Feel like you have a little bit more free will and latitude and all of that. And then the Sag full moon on May 31st is in your second house. So you might have a different view of money at that point because Jupiter disposits the full moon from the ninth. You might, yeah, spend money on travel. You also could be transitioning to a different job. You could have a celebration over dinner. Yeah, dinner celebration. Second house full moons also relate sometimes to selling a physical item or possession. Sagittarius. Let me go back a day to get the moon in Taurus, just for my visual, as a visual aid. Sagittarius, the this month, Mars keeps going forward, barreling ahead in your fifth. There's a intensity to your creative efforts, or maybe a bit of a seductive nature to your dates. When Mars is in the fifth, usually people end up hooking up with somebody. If you're already married, it might just spice up your romantic life. Some Sages will even procreate. Saturn in the fifth means that a lot of Sages are becoming responsible for a child in the next 2 years. When Mars is also paired with Saturn in the fifth, I mean, actions have consequences. If you hook up with somebody, you might, you know, might get a positive pregnancy test a couple weeks later. So, uh, I'm not trying to instill fear, but just, I mean, the horoscopes obviously like are thematic. So it could just be that you're going on a date. Some Sagittarius probably will become pregnant. Um, your individual birth chart will dictate more specifics, but the specific outcome. But I think horoscopes still have a purpose because, like, now the Sagittarius who are watching this are like, okay, if I don't want a kid, then I'll be more careful in the first half of May. So, anyways, and Jupiter's in the eighth, so there's a lot of procreative potential, honestly, for Sages. Or maybe you're birthing a business, or um, you're investing in your creativity, and that maybe is being monetized somehow. The new moon in Taurus in the sixth, I should say, maybe 16th technically, is really a new journey, health-wise or work-wise. Maybe you're adopting a new fitness regimen, new diet. Maybe you're kind of adopting a new, yeah, a co-working relationship. Maybe you are working with new people, basically. Maybe you have a new direct manager, but maybe your nutritional intake is changing. Um, and by the way, Mars goes into the sixth in the second half of the month. So that's when I think Sages will start to build muscle and strengthen their bodies, but also they have to avoid injury in the second half of May. Venus goes into the eighth in late May. That's great for Sages who are investing money into something. Potentially, your portfolio might grow. Maybe you're gaining financial wealth through a partnership, like a business partnership. In rare cases, you could get an inheritance. I know I talk about that every video. There's some sign that might get an inheritance, but statistically, probabilistically, it's Sagittarius right now. Um, yeah, and also Venus and Gemini in your seventh for the first half of the month is pretty entertaining when it comes to relationships. I mean, Sagittarius are the most likely to just kind of suddenly start dating someone out of the blue, to run into someone out of the blue and suddenly like them. But I'm not convinced that it necessarily has long-term potential. Uranus in the seventh is kind of here for a good time, not a long time, in a lot of respects. And maybe not always a good time, it's kind of a disruptive time. But, let it be known that Sagittarius technically could start a relationship just by virtue of Venus being in the seventh and Mars being in the fifth. It's kind of spicy. It is seductive in a way. So, yeah, Sagittarius is your relationships actually look pretty fun. And at the end of the month, the full moon is in your sign, so you're releasing a lot of feelings, emotions, and you're realizing what you've buried beneath in your subconscious, maybe. I mean, the moon in general represents like the unconscious and the hidden aspects of the psyche. So when the full moon's in your sign, you're just gonna have a lot of revelations about your inner self, right? And maybe some of you will move even. I don't know. Sometimes when a full moon's in your sign, you even actually move. The moon is the home, or you have a revelation about family or something. Um, oh, I'm going back days, not hours. Okay. So Capricorn, let's talk about you. So, yep, Capricorn, Mars continues in your fourth. Could wreak havoc in your family or your domestic life if you're fighting with your family or cohabitant. Or you're just taking charge of your home life. You're moving furniture around. You are just more independent from your family. Uh, we also have Venus in the sixth, so you're collaborating quite a bit with a lot of different coworkers. It's very, you know, your work life, I think, is actually pretty interesting this month. You're in a dialogue constantly with other coworkers, ideally. And the Taurus new moon on May 16th is in the fifth house, and that could be the beginning, the seeds being planted of a casual relationship, or a creative project, or a recreational activity or creative hobby that you're suddenly stepping into. Um, I mean, I like this month for the most part for you because what I really enjoy is that Venus goes into the seventh and Mars goes into the fifth. So similar to how, Sagittarius is, had that pairing while Mars was in Aries and Venus was in Gemini. Once Mars and Venus switch simultaneously, basically into Cancer and Taurus, then Capricorns have Mars in the fifth and Venus in the seventh. But the catch, and it's even better for Caps because Venus becomes co-present with Jupiter. So Venus co-presence with Jupiter in the seventh increases the odds that you find a partner who's more emotionally available and supportive and nurturing. Mars in the fifth means that maybe there's some sexual chemistry. I mean, maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like whenever Mars is in Scorpio in my fifth house, there's just a bit more sexual chemistry going on. But I think you can make that argument for Mars in the fifth, regardless of sign. But other times Mars in the fifth is kind of focused on athletics. I mean, putting energy into like recreational hobbies. I never have clients with Mars in the fifth, by the way. I have almost no experiential data about it. It's kind of crazy. So maybe people with Mars in the fifth are off just competing, playing sports, doing amusing, fun activities, and not caring about astrology. I don't know. Fifth house is gambling too, so you got to be careful about that when Mars goes in the fifth. Maybe you develop a bit of a gambling streak or some kind of impulsiveness around gambling, which is you got to avoid that. And then the Sag full moon at the end of the month is in the 12th, so there's more of introspective spiritual dimension to it, but disposited by Jupiter in the seventh. I think Capricorns are actually getting out of their own way. They're letting go of an old attitude or belief that was blocking them from a partnership. Because I saw a post from David Guillaume the other day that was like 12 qualities that are blocking someone from finding their partner. And it was like all these qualities like sounded like a Capricorn to me. Oh, that my ex wasn't good enough for this reason or something. And that, yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that that sort of attitude like just doesn't allow space for a new partner to come in. Or like railing on your exes all the time. I feel like that's a very Capricorn thing, or maybe a Virgo thing too. But um, Capricorns have that sort of not good enough attitude sometimes. Full moon in the 12th, juxtaposed with Jupiter and Venus in the seventh might change that story. Maybe you decide, hey, I'm letting go of the past. I'm not I'm kind of unbothered by, my exes and I'm truly going to welcome someone new. All right, so Aquarius, we have Mars kind of going forward in your third until May 18th. Mars in the third definitely brings about spirited debates, borderline arguments, and verbal jousting, but it also helps you analyze things. There's a motivation there to like hyper analyze, sift through data, maybe even take a road trip or travel to communicate. So you're doing a lot, you're keeping busy for sure. It's a hectic day to day. And also, the Venus is in Gemini in your fifth, and Venus in the fifth is very charming, I think, very creative and romantic. Romantic. So if you're an Aquarius looking for romance, first half of May is your best bet, up until Venus goes into Leo and Jupiter goes into Leo. But yeah, the Taurus new moon on May 16th is in your fourth. Some of you will adopt a new dynamic with family or roommates. Maybe you're actually moving into a new house. Potentially, you are just making your home more pleasant or something. Um, yeah, but I think what's interesting is then in the second half of May, Mars goes into the fourth, Venus goes into the sixth. With Mars in the fourth, you might be acting more independently in your home or family, doing some heavy lifting. I think with Mars, there's action being taken. So maybe moving furniture around, like I said for another for Caps earlier. And then as Venus goes into the sixth, I think you're actually focused on your health and your wellness and maybe harmonizing with coworkers, getting along with coworkers, but also just kind of balancing yourself out like with your physical health, focusing on nutrition or more balanced diet or something. Or maybe your work is just more lucrative. Maybe like something you're working on ends up getting you promoted down the line. I just think with Venus and Jupiter in your sixth, however you're serving people or serving your clients or whoever, although that's not really the way to think about the sixth house. I mean, but like the sixth house is really acts of service. Um, so with clients, I mean, I actually kind of think more about the seventh house. But anyways, the sixth house shows that like the work you're putting into something, the labor is eventually paying off. And I know I said that for Scorpios earlier, but I think for Aquariuses too, that's generally also the case. But I think for Aquariuses, they're actually enjoying the camaraderie of their coworkers. I don't think Scorpios are that feeling that way at all. They might feel a little bit like butting heads with their coworkers. And then the Sag full moon on May 31st is in your 11th house. So that could be a party, a celebration, camaraderie with friends, disposited by Jupiter in the sixth. Maybe a friend gives you a different perspective on your health, honestly. Or serving a friend. You're going out of your way for a friend in a way that um, I don't know, just like benefits the friendship. They really appreciate it. All right, so Pisces. Mars is in your second house until May 18th. That can cause some stress with money, can make you impulsive with spending money or trying to make money quickly. But you can also start to make money independently. You can make your own hack into your own source of income. I think a lot of Pisces are going the entrepreneurial route. With Saturn in the second, though, you want your income to last. And with Neptune in the second, you don't want to be deceived, certainly, financially. But yeah, Pisces are taking matters into their own hands financially, ideally. Venus in the fourth for the first half of the month. Entertain guests at your home, host a party, or just relate more easily with your family. Or decorate your home, do something creative in your home. Taurus new moon, May 16th, is in your third. So you're setting a new daily routine, daily habit. Having an important conversation with a family member or something property related. Maybe, yeah, maybe there's something property related you're talking about, just given that Venus disposits the new moon and it's in your fourth. Um, but yeah, the new moon could also be the beginning of writing a book, the beginning of some kind of educational track, um, or just a new thought process. And then, in the second half of May, Mars goes into the third, Venus goes into the fifth. When Mars goes into the third, you'll be very motivated to debate people, argue with people, talk with people. really just get into the nitty-gritty data of something. Venus in the fifth, or at that same time, will enhance your creativity, your romantic life. You might get along with a situationship a little bit better. You might meet a situationship who's really good for you. You might come up with an amazing work of art or something creative that ends up actually becoming very lucrative, whether it's a song or otherwise. But I think there's a lot of good moments for you there, romantically and creatively. And then the Sag full moon on May 31st is in your 10th, which is maybe a transition in the career. And maybe it's a high point in your career, recognition for something. Maybe it's a change of heart about your parent. I don't know, maybe you just have a discussion, a rich discussion with them about something Sagittarian, aspirations, faith, philosophy. But I do think perspective is changing for Pisces at the end of the month regarding career. And with Jupiter dispositing from the fifth, I think it's maybe a revelation that, hey, I got to be doing something more creative. I have to enjoy what I do. For sure. That's what Pisces are realizing. So I always do this on my YouTubes. I always go like an hour over the time that I actually have. Fuck. I gotta wake up early. Well, I'm glad I did the video. I mean, I think it's it's important for me to do like a summary of the month ahead. For many reasons, I was not able to do this video any sooner. But if you liked what you saw, subscribe to my channel, like this video, get a reading from me. I I have a very limited number of spots, so just check my website every couple days and grab a spot if you see it. Um, and if you want to ask more of a one-off pointed question, just subscribe, become a paid subscriber to my Substack, and I'll do like a little 10-15 minute reading for you. Or just, join the community over there. It's always entertaining. We've got a little chat going on a couple of different threads on Substack. And like I said, I don't really reveal too much about my personal life online, but on my Substack, I feel a lot more comfortable just sort of, oh, yeah, opening up. So, yeah, I don't know if you're interested in who I am as a human being, then check out the Substack. But if I'm just a talking head to you, that's fine. I'm not offended. Um, but yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and I hope you have a stellar month of May. Take care.